And I said, I'm going to tell you something that's going to be freeing for you if you'll just take it for the truth. I said, I don't like strawberry ice cream. I love rum raisin probably because it has liquor in it, but I don't like strawberry ice cream. If you are strawberry ice cream and you're auditioning for me, your job is to be the best strawberry ice cream. It might not be to my taste, but the guy that runs the opera company down the street is going to love strawberry ice cream. Your only job is to take all that off your plate and sing.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
Okay, this is going to sound a little like a humble brag, but bear with me, I don't really mean it that way. I mentioned about 8 or 10 episodes ago that way back when I could remember things, I was a 2-day Jeopardy champion. And I did great in categories like U.S. mayors, the Great Lakes, 1970s TV trivia. My luck ran out, though, on day 3, and for about the next 20 years, I blamed it on the opera category. Like, I knew just enough about opera to answer questions wrong. In fact, I remember having a chat right after the taping with the guy who won about knowing a little but not enough about opera. But not long ago, I went back to the archives and looked at that third day, and there was not actually an opera category. What there was an entire category on Handel's Messiah, which is not an opera at all, and one question about Enrico Caruso. It turns out that the biggest gaffe I made was mixing up 2 1980s hair bands, Guns N' Roses and Poison. All that is to say, that day made me a little intimidated by opera, a feeling that has only gradually faded over the last couple of decades as I've come to appreciate the art form and especially the people who devote their lives to it. People like Darren Woods, who has been part of the legendary Schroon Lake-based Seagle Festival since the mid-1990s. Today, he is the artistic director, but actually, his history with Seagle goes back even further, as we'll hear in a moment. Over more than a century, Seagle has brought in some of the brightest rising stars in the field to help them develop as artists, performing in both opera and musical theater. This year's edition is just getting underway. It includes performances of Brigadoon, Don Giovanni, Cold Mountain, and Sweeney Todd. I met up with Darren Woods partway between NCPR and Schroon Lake in Keene Valley. Thanks so much for meeting me halfway.
Thank you much for meeting me in Keene. It's a good middle-of-the-road place for us to all get together.
I guess I want to start by talking about Seagle Festival itself, because it traces its history back to when it was Seagle Colony and the Seagle Theater, back to the 19-teens.
Right.
The world was a really different place in those days, and I imagine the idea of starting something like Seagle in a place like the Adirondacks meant something different than what it would if someone were to say, hey, let's start a music colony like this in 2024. Why is it still important to do something like Seagle Festival in a place like Schroon Lake in a time like 2024?
Yeah, a great question. And, things have changed. The program's changed over the years. In 1915, when Oscar Seagle originally founded the company, it was first in Hague for 2 years. And then he had a friend that was building this resort called the Brown Swan Hotel. And he said, well, I'll just build a house out there. Why don't you just teach voice up there? So originally, until about the mid-40s, it was just voice lessons. And the reason the Adirondacks was all these people studied either with Oscar in Paris or New York City, and it was hot, and there was no air conditioning, and so everybody was trying to find places north. The famous soprano Marcella Sembrick taught in Bolton Landing, and Oscar Seagle finally moved up to Schroon Lake. Years later, his son, John, wanted to do shows. So they were driving a car with all the singers down to Camp Wikiosco in Glens Falls every day for rehearsals to do shows. Finally, in the mid-40s, we built what is now our theater. When I came as a singer, voice teachers brought their singers up here. You do some shows. It wasn't really career training per se. It was just come here, do some shows, just kind of like, Judy and Mickey in the barn. You just came and did some shows. So when I became director in 1996, after a few years, we did things called audition classes. And a singer said, that's probably the most important thing we did this year. And over the years, it's become this really the step before you launch yourself into your professional career. And so we have everything from, of course, voice lessons, coachings and shows and all those things, but also strategic planning, audition classes, finance classes, to really set a singer up for having a business. And the reason here is it's really beautiful. Back in 1915, of course, through the 60s, Scroon Lake and all these towns were happening places. There were hotels everywhere. There were fully orchestras playing in all these towns. Famous singers and famous musicians would come. As jet travel and air conditioning and things sort of made the Adirondacks, had a lot of fires of hotels made at the Adirondacks fade over the years. The mystique of coming up here, even for me in 1980, I remember in Houston, right? And some friends in the Houston Grand Opera Chorus just say, you've got to come to Seagle, you've got to come to Seagle. I had no idea what that was, so of course I paid my tuition and came. And I'll never forget driving up Charlie Hill Road, which was dirt at that time, and thinking, what in the heck have I gotten myself into? But within 3 days, I was just in love with the place, and sort of, obviously, I live here permanently now, year round. Winter has not even deterred me, so it's a magical place. And still, you watch the singers, even to this day, sort of realize that they can create something magical in this magical place.
1980 was a while ago.
Yes.
I suspect we probably both had hair in 1980.
Indeed.
Can you remember back to those 3 days and what that transformation was for you that led you to fall in love with Seagle?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I was from a small town, so I went to going to school at University of Houston. Was like, whoa, the city. And so I was back in this really sort of small place, and you just sort of got the feeling from the people who were running it even then that you could do anything. I remember that I got there here a couple of days early, and the stage director, who's still with us, Richard Kagi, is still director of production. I said, is there anything I can do to help? And he said, yeah, take that wood and go build a picnic table. And I said, how do you do that? And he said, you put all that together until it looks like a picnic table. And when I came here in 1996, that picnic table was still there. We still used it for a few years. So it just is sort of we still say this today, there is no failure at Seagle Festival. Any singer, the only failure is failure to try. So we're going to ask you to do things, we're going to ask you to risk, but it's going to make you a better performer, and it's going to give you strengths that you didn't even know you had. And that's really sort of part of the mission of what we do, is just giving singers the tools they have to, and also technicians and composers and all sorts of people in a beautiful surrounding that just, you feel invincible.
Is there a model for the type of musician that comes to Seagle as part of their artistic journey?
Yeah, I mean, all of them are very serious, very serious opera singers are studying opera singing. We do 2 book musicals, big book musicals and we do 2 operas. One of them's an American opera. So there's a real interest in singing as a profession. What Seagle offers these singers that most places of our level don't is the reputation is so enormous, because our alumni are singing in every opera house in the world. One of the 5 Met winners last year was one of our alumni. We've had Met debuts and Met debuts on top of Met debuts and Met winners. They're singing in Europe. They're singing everywhere. So that reputation, but also what they get is the reputation is so good that those companies come to Scroon Lake in the summer and listen to the singers. So we will have the Metropolitan Opera, Glimmerglass, Des Moines, managers from New York City that will travel a little Scroon Lake just to hear these singers. And that started happening about 12, 14 years ago, when the head of the opera studio from Houston Grand Opera came. And Laura was there. We were sitting, and she was listening to my kids sing. And I said, I'm really flattered, but this is the not ready for primetime players. They're on the step before that. And she said, I know that. But we in Houston Grand Opera are watching them take their place among all the singers in the world, and we want to know who's coming up over the next 5 years. So then schools started coming in, and it just blossomed. And now that we have streaming, thank you pandemic, one of the few things we can thank the pandemic for, we have a beautiful cameras and streaming services. Now those auditions can be streamed across the world. So the Paris Opera General Director and the German houses can also see these singers in real time auditioning. So that's what we have that really nobody else has.
Given that Oscar Seagle was known for his work in New York and Paris, maybe it's lucky that he didn't choose the Alps for this.
Absolutely. I should think so. In fact, it was right during and after the war that they came back to Paris. He was a wonderful concert baritone. And this is sort of a part of the history. After the war, he made a recording of a sort of a a sappy, beautiful song called Old Pal of Mine. And it became a hit, this record. And in 1918, he got a royalty check from Columbia for $90,000, which somebody translated into how many millions of it that would be today. And he bought the farms where we are today. So he was not just a teacher, but also a really famous concert singer. Another thing that he was famous for, and we talked about this at our Juneteenth concert, he was one of the first people that started closing all his concerts with Negro spirituals. And so in salute...
Do you know why that was?
He knew Burley, and he knew some of those people the composers who he invited up here to compose on the very property where we are now. And black composers they couldn't sing in a lot of places. They couldn't perform in a lot of places. So it was great when somebody like Oscar Seagle wanted to do that. So we just came up on a manuscript that we don't even know if it's published, that Burley wrote in his own hand for Oscar to sing. And so then it became a tradition for people to sing African-American spirituals. At the end of our concert, to salute that tradition, we had 6 beautiful spirituals by 6 of our artists this year, both African-American and white singers who were performing together, celebrating this incredible holiday, but also honoring the tradition that Oscar was singing living composers' music even then, even black person composers.
I say this a lot when people ask me about the work that I do at NCPR, what it's like to be the station manager in a place where, so many people are on the air. And fortunately, getting to do interviews like this is one of the things that sort of keeps me in touch with what I love about radio, and the idea that, I would never want to do radio without getting a chance to be on the radio. Let me put this to you, having come up as a singer and singing at Seagle in 1980, what is the difference to you between doing what you did for all those years and being in the part of your art that you're in now?
Yeah, that's great. I remember doing an interview much like this when I was singing. I was in Kansas City singing The Witch and Hansel and Gretel. And Scott Cantrell, it was a print interview, and he said, wow, you're having a great career, and what do you think? And I said, I wish I had 3 lives, because I really love being a singer, but I want to run an opera company, a big opera company, and I really want to teach and be a mentor. And I think at the end of the day, my life is meant to be a mentor. I had so many people, famous people, that were pulling me up and helping me when I was singing, that I've always wanted that to be a part of my life. So the first day that I retired from singing in 1990, so I kept singing. I got Seagle in 96. I kept singing for 3 more years to make sure that this transition. So I became general director of Shreveport, we were doing Romeo and Juliet. I arrived, and 2 weeks later, the first production was on that the other person had cast. And I thought, I sang Tybalt a lot. I wonder how I'm going to feel when somebody else is up there singing my part. And the opera started, and I sat back, and he went up for that first high note, and I said, I'm really glad he can have that. I'm perfectly happy in here. But now the greatest joy for me is, I don't brag about myself a lot, but I say that I insure my ears for Lloyd's of London, because I love hearing that singer that maybe even their teachers have thought, I'm not quite so sure, but that Tony and me and the artistic side of the staff can go, there's something in there, and we can help them pull that out. And then to see them, 4 years later win the Met or do something. I remember we had one singer years ago. His name's Tyler Simpson. He tells the same story. But we picked him in Kansas City. He had a degree in biology and decided he was going to go be a singer. And we took him and gave him a really great role. And his teacher said, I'm really thrilled, but I said, mark my words, this is going to be a big deal. And so he was at Seagle 2 years. He was at Yale for graduate school. His last semester at Yale, the artistic administrator of the Metropolitan Opera was seeing his Figaro. And he said, well, I want you to come audition for the Met. He took the train back to New York City and just sent him an email saying, you don't have to audition. I'm going to send you a contract next week. So Tyler called me and he said, as soon as I change my shorts, I have something to tell you. So then he called me back and told me all this good news. And he has a family. He sings at the Met regularly. He's in the chorus now and does small parts. But he sung for many years at the Metropolitan Opera.
Wow. Talk about finding diamonds in the rough. I mean, maybe this is a question like what makes a joke funny, and as you deconstruct it, it ceases to lose its humor. But when you see something or hear something that maybe not everybody hears. Can you put into words what you're listening for?
Yeah. Everybody says, how do you sit from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening, hearing a singer every 9 minutes with a 30-minute break for lunch? And it's a lot. We can hear 50 people in a day. But when you're looking for extraordinary, you're not just looking for good. And an extraordinary in a 21-year-old throat is different from extraordinary in a 27 or a 28-year-old throat. So we're looking for great potential, but we're looking for, here's how I say it. You saw the movie Alien, right? That monster that like rips through your chest. I'm looking for that kid or that young singer, that emerging artist who's got that monster in their body and they just don't yet quite know how to get it out. And you can see it in their face. You can hear it in the potential of their voice. You can see it in the joy that they bring to that audition, because auditions are anything but joyous, as you well know. But they bring something to that audition that is, you can say, that is special. And what was remarkable, Mitch, is during the pandemic, when we had to do everything online. So we canceled the 2020 season, of course, but we did the 2021 season. And there was this young singer, and he's like doing so well. He's in graduate school now. And when I saw his video, he didn't go to a big school. He didn't have great Italian. He mispronounced the name. He sang 3 songs on that. But there was something about that singer that his hand reached out from that screen and grabbed my heart and just yanked it out of my body. And Tony and I were talking, and Tony's our general director, and he said, do you think he's ready? And I said, what he's got cannot be taught. What he doesn't have, we can teach him. And together, that's going to be magic. So, it's even that. It's kind of like, you know it when you see it, and you know it when you hear it, when it's really extraordinary. And they all, I tell them from the first check-in audition was Monday, where they all sang for each other for the first time. They all met each other for the first time. And that's a really hard thing to do, to get in front of 30 strangers that you don't know and sing your heart out. And they bond immediately after that. But I say, you're all here because you have something to work on. If you didn't have that, you'd be at Santa Fe. You'd be singing somewhere and getting paid for it. You're here. Everybody's here, and they're on an equal basis. And again, I say over and over again, there's no failure except failure to try. And then, like every day, I get to watch them grow and take that. In 4 weeks, one of them is going to sing an audition class, and they're going to hit that high note or do that piece of repertoire. And when they know they got it, we just all rejoice together in that. It's such a huge, huge thing to watch them grow.
What do you consider when you're putting together a season, an artistic season?
That's so great, because there's a real strategy to that. So most of our singers come for 2 years. So we always pick the American opera first, because the NEA makes us do the grant in the summer, and what I really like to do for everything else, and what I used to do, is I wait till the middle of the summer, and I think, okay, these 12 people might be coming back. And so that maybe is a Marriage of Figaro cast, or I think that would be cozy, and we could pair that with Jake Hagee's Dead Men Walking, or Weber. So I start to build the 2 operas in my mind based on the singers that are coming back, that we know are coming back, or fairly sure. Then the musicals just sort of happen. But if you're going to come back for a second year, we want you to have even a more rich experience than you had the first time. So you're going to get the bigger role. You're going to get the leading role, sometimes 2 leading roles. And so we'll populate the first years with the rest of the season. And there's an awful lot of first years that are getting some really, our Sweeney Todd and one of our Joannis is a first year singer, and just came and rocked our world. And we're like, okay, that's it. He's going to be a big star, so let's get him now. I think another thing that makes us unique, every single decision, every single thing at Seagle Festival, every decision is made with the artist in mind. Thank God for our board and our audience. They understand that the artistic process is not based on how many tickets we can sell or the audience or any of that. It is what is good for the artist. And that stays true for every second that they're there. And we also make a promise that we have kept over these 29 years that I've been there. We promise that we will be there with them until we stop breathing air. And so they will call and say, I just had a rotten audition. What should I do? Or I need help getting an audition, or I'm going to go to Europe. We try to we are there for them as long as they need us. But it's that putting the artist first that makes it unique.
What do you tell someone who's had a rotten audition?
Let it go. We just had today, we had the audition 10 Commandments, which I oddly enough wrote 20 years ago for Opera News. And one of them is like your only job in an audition, like the thing that singers do, all of them, all of us, you go in and you're like, please give me the job. I want the job. I'm going to throw myself out that window if you don't give me the job. And that puts a whole lot of a burden on the people that are on the panel, because I can smell desperation when it walks in behind me. And it is just a burden. And I just say, your only job is to show the tools that you have developed today with the greatest amount of joy. I want to see that animal in there. And then pat yourself on the back and say, I did well. And I said, I'm going to tell you something that's going to be freeing for you if you'll just take it for the truth. I said, I don't like strawberry ice cream. I love rum raisin probably because it has liquor in it. But I don't like strawberry ice cream. If you are strawberry ice cream and you're auditioning for me, your job is to be the best strawberry ice cream. It might not be to my taste, but the guy that runs the opera company down the street is going to love strawberry ice cream. You have no idea what I need, what's going on in my head, what's going on in my production schedule. Your only job is to take all that off your plate and sing. Do your job. And if you have a rotten audition, I usually say, we're human. It happens. I remember I did what I thought was a horrible audition, and I called my manager, like, oh my God, it was horrible. I just sang so awful, and so was it. And she said, okay, first of all, you just got the job, so stop whining. But also, great singers occupy a certain space, and good singers occupy space below great singers. And on their worst day, a great singer is going to be better than just a good singer. So it's all perspective. But when you're 23 and you're like, oh, it's the end of the world. So the more tools we can get them of just like, have a life, go hiking, have a family, do things. This is your job. This is not your life. This is just your job. It's a great job, and you're going to see the world, and people are going to pay you to do it, and that is awesome. But perspective.
When you think about, when you're writing the Darren Woods memoir, or somebody's making the film of your life or the opera of your life, what are the 2 or 3 moments from this part of your life? Can you think about the examples that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, from there's the singing side, and there's the sort of the life side. I remember, I sang The Witch many, many, many times, and I was about to wind down my career, although I didn't know that. And there's this rotten note in the middle of that, and I've been taking with this wonderful teacher. Her name's Inji Bashar, and she happened to be in the audience that night. And I started singing, and I was like, wow, I think I've really got it. And so I went up for that high B, and I remember looking at the Hansel, who was Chris Jepton, and her eyes just bugged out. And so for the rest of that night, I was just like on fire. And I went backstage, and I was like, I got it. And my teacher came back, and she said, you got it. And what's more important, you knew you got it. And it was so freeing. Another thing about this is just being up here was the first time I climbed a rooster comb, and which is just down the street from where we are, and that incredible beauty, and to have that beauty be just as much of an artistic experience as anything. I also like my father's transition from an opera hater to an opera lover. We were from a small town in Texas, and from Italian opera he didn't know. So I would say, well, I'm going to go see Butterfly. And he's like, well, that's that Japanese girl who's, yeah, we've already seen that one. I'm like, it's not like a movie, really. You can see it again. So he came to Santa Fe to see me in Salome, and we're going to go to the dress rehearsal. Going to be supportive. I said, Dad, no, you're going to hate it. There's no surtitles. You're not going to know. No. He went that night, Salome, and went crazy. And it turns out the surtitles were the barrier. He wanted to make up his own story in his mind, and just watch the spectacle and not read all those things. So from that day on, he came to everything I did, everything I produced, and wanted to sit in the front row so we didn't have to look at those titles. So those are sort of like 3 completely random things that when I think about, that was a really happy time when that transition happened.
How did a kid from a small town in Texas get into opera?
It's luck and taking every opportunity. I'll make this short, but I didn't know. I'd never seen an opera, so I went to Sam Houston State University. I knew I wanted music, and I majored in trombone and minored in piano. And they had voice lessons. I'd been in all-state choir, but voice lessons? That sounds kind of cool. So I took those. And my sophomore year, as a smart, elegant 19-year-old, I did a recital where I played the Hindemith trombone sonata, and I played some Debussy preludes on the piano, and I sang some Benjamin Britten songs. And this woman was accompanying a violinist that night, and I was to turn pages for her. And she heard me sing those songs. And I turned pages that night, and her name was Betty Ruth Tomforty. She's in heaven right now. And she turned to me and she said, I never do this. I never do this. You need to be an opera singer, and you need to transfer to the University of Houston. My daughter is the artistic administrator of Houston Grand Opera. I will call her. I will get you an audition. And I said, I know 2 art songs. I know nothing. She said, just come sing. And I got into the Houston Grand Opera course, and they took shows to Broadway. So I thought, well, that's my ticket. I want to go to Broadway. Like my first opera was Norma with Renata Scotto and Tatiana Troyanos, like all these great singers. And, I came up here in 80. I met my husband. He went to Santa Fe in 81. I said, so what does it take to go to Santa Fe? He said, learn a couple of arias. So the next year I was in Santa Fe, and a very amazing manager, Matthew Epstein, heard me, and I made my Carnegie Hall debut. And then everybody realized that I really didn't know much. So they put me back in the Houston program to learn what I needed to know. But it was really serendipity, and that one person saying, I can help you if you want to do this. And I looked back, when she passed away, I called her daughter Ann, and I said, I don't know if you know this about your mother, but that was life-changing for me. And I would not be here today were it not for that small conversation and the fact that she put action behind her words. So we can all do something to change the world every day, and that absolutely changed mine.
Even if it was the trombone's loss.
It was well, the trombone's not feeling any loss, I assure you. I wasn't that good. I'm a much better singer.
All right, so years ago, I had the chance to interview Marilyn Horne. And I asked her this question, and I feel like I have to ask it to you now. Do you sing in the shower?
Well, I have to tell you that Marilyn Horne's one of my dearest friends, and when she was living in New York City, if I didn't call her and go for dinner, I was in big trouble. I don't, although that's not true. I sing once a year at the concert we're having on Saturday. We start it with Old Friends. We end it with Old Friends. It's called Old Friends New. From Merrily We Roll Along. And I used to sing the whole first verse. Now I'm older, so I just sing the first line, and I'm joined by the singers. So I'm now kind of in the state of warming up for my one big show a year, which is Saturday night. And then I'll put it to rest for another 11 and a half months, and we'll see what happens when my 67th birthday happens.
Well, Darren Woods, break a leg.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Darren Woods is the artistic director of the Seagle Festival. He's been with the Schroon Lake-based organization since 1996. He actually sang there all the way back in 1980. The festival's 2024 season runs through August, and you can find a link to more at ncpr.org/northwards. And thanks so much to the Keene Valley Congregational Church for sharing their space for us to do the interview. Our very own tenor, or maybe baritone, Ethan Shanty, takes a solo from here and shares the names of the people who make this show possible.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.